fun.
You know what's really nice? I always say yes, but it's really nice to be asked. Do you want to buy one, or you just want to photograph them?
Oh, I love it when I leave. But nobody
Well, my sister's here since 3:15. Probably about 5,000, maybe more. 3:15.
Hey, you got a bite. I can cross right through. Excuse me. Flash it in.
Okay, we'll tell you tomorrow. Good.
Very frustrating. They're obviously.
This is on parking. This is the all back to that.
But there's a certain amount of press that have reserved seats but have already said that. Have you done that? Yeah. Okay. But at this point, you're like, everybody try to stay as close to Bill as you can.
Doors at 6:30.
Yes, this is the end of it, and you likely won't get in at this point. Sorry. Right. We've been telling people kind of for this half of the building that you likely won't get in, so sorry.
We won't be getting it. Telling us you won't be getting it. You could listen on 99.5.
5.
Almost 6:30. I was just showing David the sunset. So they gotta walk. And that's how she.
Lancer.
Over my education.
He's gonna be the best. Just walk down the line. Are they being left out? I don't know.
Some other people and
I don't know why it's called me.
It's probably never. He just kind of did. He just kind of talks about it.
It was a nice mix of guys.
They're saying that they don't like military history. That day. And
Something.
smoking down there. But
oh, it's free 30 minutes. Right up.
Great American.
second us out.
It normally costs. Normally is. Who are you televising for?
The FBI.
Huh? Oh, we came here at 5 o'clock. From New Jersey.
Evening. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Salman Rushdie. I'm the president of Pan American Center, which makes it extremely appropriate to be speaking from the Lincoln podium. A number of presidents have spoken from this podium before, most famously Abraham Lincoln, who made his famous Right Makes Might speech from here just before he was elected president. Grant, Cleveland, Taft, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Bill Clinton, and me. So, thanks. You have a list of participants. As you'll see, there's 1 or 2 minuses and 1 or 2 pluses, but here we all are. And just a couple of little housekeeping things. I wanted to say, first of all, how amazing it is to see a house like this in August on a day like this. And I think it shows the concern there is around these issues. I think actually, I personally would like to thank all the writers who've come from their holiday homes in Malibu to take part, because as we all know, that's what writers do in the summer. I think, again, that's an indication of how seriously we take the situation that we've come here to discuss, that the writers have come and that you have come, and there it is. It speaks for itself, I think. I would like to thank a number of people. Our funders, without whom we wouldn't have been able to put this on, the Kaplan Foundation, FJC, which is a foundation of donor-advised funds, the Lila Atchison Wallace Theatre Fund of the New York Community Trust, the New York State Council on the Arts, and a number of PEN members who have individually contributed. And the event is also co-sponsored by the Cooper Union itself, so thank you to all of them. Thank you to, I know that the PEN staff have been working like crazy people to get this to happen. Peter Mayer, Andrea Giavaran, and various other PEN folks from interns upwards, and really we owe them a great debt of thanks because we wouldn't be able to have been here without them. So thank you to them. You should be aware, if you're not already, that we are on live radio. We are on WBAI, and thank you. And the event is also being recorded by C-SPAN, so it will be at some point on C-SPAN as well. And just as an extra bonus for showing up, we've made it extremely hot, so that you'll all weigh less when you leave. So it's also slimming to be here. Now I just want to say a couple of words before we all start reading about why we wanted to arrange this event and why we're here. I wanted to start by saying that I don't think any of us who arranged this event delude ourselves about terrorism. Terrorism does exist. In this city of all cities, we know that. We know what it exists to do, what it has done, what it tries to do. We know that it exists and must be fought. I don't think any of us would question that. How we fight it, in my view, is going to be the great civilizational test of our time. Will we become our enemy or not? Will we become repressive as our enemy is repressive? Will we become intolerant as our enemy is intolerant? Or will we not? Will we fight with different weapons? Weapons of openness, of acceptance, and seeking to increase the dialogue between peoples rather than decrease it. This is a big test. Will we become, you could say, the suits of armor that our fear makes us put on? Or will we not? It seems to us in PEN, to many of us in the last months, that we are not passing this test very well at present. And that there are serious reasons to say that there is a crisis in this country of civil liberties, freedom of speech, and human rights of exactly the kind that PEN has spent over 80 years protesting about when it happens in other countries. Exactly the things that, or not exactly, because no parallel is ever exact, but the kind of things that we have tried to highlight, whether it was in Cuba or Burma or Iran or China, those sorts of problems are beginning to crop up here. Problems of what it is possible to say without being in trouble, what it is possible to have access to the information media to talk about, the terms in which it is possible to talk about these things when one does have access to the news media, the way in which the government is becoming increasingly intrusive into areas of our lives which the government has no business to go into, what books we read, what shops we go to, what books we borrow from universities, what do we think about. That is, this gets very close to the thought police and is something which is not acceptable in a free society. PEN has identified 3 particular areas of concern in the Patriot Act and the many related laws and executive orders which have been enacted since September 11, 2001. These concerns have to do with privacy, access to information, and compliance with international law and human rights standards. And we have launched the campaign which this event is here to support, which we are calling the Campaign for Core Freedoms, in an effort to restore fundamental protections in these areas. People like me came to America because of our admiration for the protections afforded by the First Amendment. And it is extremely saddening to see those protections being eroded. And so this is not, it is really not a question of left or right. It seems to me whatever kind of American you are, you should know that the First Amendment is the jewel in the crown. And to erode that is to do terrible damage to one's sense of what it is to be an American and a citizen or a resident of this country. We are having a real go at fighting the Patriot Act's privacy protections. There is an online petition, which you can all go and see at www.readerprivacy.org. We're working with booksellers and librarians to try and get 1 million signatures to amend Section 215 of the Patriot Act. At the end of September, Penn is organizing a lobbying event in Washington, D.C. to deliver these petitions and to meet with the very large growing number of both Democrat and Republican legislators who agree that these laws need to be improved. Now, you should all have got down there envelopes with cards that you can, tick some boxes in and make your own, express your own support for this. And on the way out at the end of the evening, they will be collected from you. So please do that if you can, unless we annoy you so much that you change your mind. You can also, and please do, go to the Penn website, www.penn.org, which will tell you a lot more about what we're doing than I'm able to tell you here, and again give you all sorts of leads for what actions you might be able to take to help us in our campaign. That's about it. What we have is a very distinguished list of readers, and what we have done is to ask all of them to perform the heroic act of restraint of not reading from their own work. And what we've asked them to do is simply to bring to the evening texts, whatever they may feel might be interesting or relevant or apposite in order to have the discussion that we're trying to begin here. And just by way of starting that off, I'm going to read one paragraph of the great text, John Stuart Mill's text on liberty, written, well, getting on for 200 years ago, but feels fresh as a daisy. And the warning he offers us is that if we do not fight for our rights, we lose them. The dictum that truth always triumphs over persecution is one of those pleasant falsehoods which men repeat after one another till they pass into commonplaces, but which all experience refutes. History teems with instances of truth put down by persecution. If not suppressed forever, it may be thrown back for centuries. To speak only of religious opinions, the Reformation broke out at least 20 times before Luther and was put down. Another very long list of such things. It is a piece of idle sentimentality that truth, merely as truth, has any inherent power denied to error of prevailing against the dungeon and the stake. Men are not more zealous for truth than they often are for error, and a sufficient application of legal or even of social penalties will generally succeed in stopping the propagation of either. The real advantage which truth has consists in this, that when an opinion is true, it may be extinguished once, twice, or many times, but in the course of ages, there will generally be found persons to rediscover it until someone of its reappearances falls on a time when from favorable circumstances it escapes persecution until it has made such head as to withstand all subsequent attempts to suppress it. Thanks for coming.
Hello, I'm Laurie Anderson, and I'd like to read from a book called Air Guitar, and it's essays on art and democracy by Dave Hickey. And this is it. And it's an account of his life as a kid in Texas, and then he talks about going to jazz gigs with his dad, and bits of his attempts at life in academia, and as a gallery owner and art dealer and music critic and writer. And it's really about breaking a lot of rules. It starts off with a picture of Keith Richards on the front page. Let me be clear about this. I don't have a drug problem. I have a police problem. And then he, just briefly, there are lots of beautiful, beautiful things about music and beats and the transition from like jazz to rock, which is like four dudes kind of soloing and playing, trying not to step on each other's toes, and then four guys, four rock and rollers trying really hard to stay on the beat together, and how that beat slips and slides. And along the way, he talks a lot about America and what passes for artistic freedom, and he's not whining about, freedom as artists and the NEA and money, but in the chapter called My Weimar, he does talk about the conflicts that he had between money and art, and he's trying to figure out his experiences as an art dealer, sort of square them off. So this is the passage. So lately, I've contented myself with trying to understand how my own experience in commercial culture could have been so different, how that culture could have afforded me and so many of my co-conspirators refuge from the very injustices that are regularly attributed to it. After giving it some thought, I've decided to blame it all on my old professor, Walter Wollbach, who was the greatest of many gifts the Third Reich bestowed upon my youth. Herr Wollbach was a refugee professor. By the time I signed up for a seminar in Weimar theater, he had been one for nearly 20 years. But to his credit, he was still pissed about it. Pissed about being a refugee, pissed about being stuck in Texas, and pissed, most of all, about being a professor. Because Walter Wollbach was a theater guy, a third-generation, hard-nosed German Jew theater guy with a very low tolerance for misty bullshit. To me, he was a messenger from another world, an older world, redolent with unfamiliar textures, with brighter brights and darker darks. Through him, I could glimpse the harsh antique modernity of the Weimar winter, because Herr Wollbach was that world. Wollbach's idea of art was something flexed and rigorous, full of edges and bright light, something smart that made your pants crackle. And he was such a tough old bird, mean as a snake when aroused, but you couldn't hate him for it. He treated you like you were supposed to get out there and do something. He told me I was a callow redneck with all the spirituality of a toilet seat, that I could possibly cure the former, but would probably have to live with the latter, but that was great. Nobody had ever told me I was anything before, so I took it to heart. I mean, Jesus, he was the real thing, and he had all this stuff. He could bring it to class in cardboard boxes and drawings, and some by Gordon Craig, and blocking and diagrams and posters and account books and prompt scripts and photographs. Wollbach's seminar took place before that, during the heyday of Hemingway, Pollock, and Kerouac. So the issue in between the tragic condition of the heroic artist and the ludicrous spectacle of the effeminate sellout. The issue kept coming up in the seminar because a couple of fledgling brandos were as deeply concerned with their putative masculinity as my sculpture professor, Mr. Olivadetti, who reminded us about once a week that an artist, a real artist, is not a goddamn sissy. I found this daunting. As the product of Smash Mouth, Texas, I was looking forward to a long career of unrepentant sissydom. He then proceeded to explain to us that in case we hadn't heard, there had been 2 great wars in the century and a number of smaller ones, into which most of the able-bodied and apparently heterosexual men in Europe and the United States had been drafted, excepting those in critical industries, in government, or in education. Moreover, as he pointed out, the arts, theater, dance, music, painting, and sculpture were not critical industries, nor were they government, nor were they education. They were little businesses. So all the heterosexual men were drafted out of them. So who's left, Wollbach asked, thrusting his finger into the air and swaying behind it. Queers and women and a bunch of old Jews. Suddenly, they are the arts. They do a little business and they night. They get paid a little for it and they do their best, while the government and the goyim are out there killing one another. Then the war's over and all the big brave soldiers come home feeling very angry and very heroic. And what do they find? They find the world has changed. This was true in Weimar and it's true again today. All these soldiers look around and they see the culture of the nation being run by effeminate, Semitic, commercial pansies. And they are shocked. For the first time in history, the songs we sing, the pictures we see, and the plays we attend are not being dispensed by overeducated Aryan muscle boys, and these muscle boys are very upset. But what can they do? Business is business. After all, even Aryan muscle boys believe in that. And as long as pictures are being bought and plays are being attended and songs are being sung, well, you might think they can't do anything, Wollbach said slyly, but you'd be wrong. because the muscle boys still control the government and the universities. The professors and the bureaucrats, they were not drafted. They're cozy in their little bund, pleasing no one but themselves. And they tell themselves that even though business is business, culture is culture too, and culture is public business. And they will teach women and Jews and queers to make this muscle boy art too, and it will be very pure. Because they are muscle boys and they don't have to please anyone, so there will be no cabaret, no pictures, no fantasy or flashing lights, no filth or sexy talk, no cruelty, no melodies, no laughter, no Max Reinhardt, no Urfaust, no A Midsummer Night's Dream, and nobody will love it. And nobody will pay money to own it or see it, but that will not matter. The government will pay for it and the universities, because paying your own money for culture and making your own money out of it, this is a Jew thing, a queer thing, and a silly woman thing. It means you're not satisfied with what the professors provide, with what the Reichsminister tells you is good. It means you want more, and that is unpatriotic. Here, Volbach paused for a moment, and even though I hadn't said a single word, he fixed his gaze on me and continued, "So, all you Aryan muscle boys down there at the end of the table, don't be Aryan muscle boys. I've seen enough official culture. I'll teach you how to hit your marks and set the lights and make the tempo float. The rest you'll have to learn from women and queers out in the dark. Also, don't be too artistic to count your own receipts. Also, carry your own pistol. There are things out there." Thus spoke Herr Volbach. And even though it's not Volbach verbatim and does not begin to convey the majesty of his disdain, this is the world he showed to me, which was the world that I found when I abandoned my graduate studies in 1967 and opened a commercial art gallery. It was heaven. In other words, danger, glamour, queers, women, and Jews. No structure, no credentials, just soldiers of desire doing a little business in the night. And even though that world is dead, thoroughly institutionalized and never to return, the pale, angular ghost of Herr Volbach continues to flicker in my consciousness, as he used to prowl the back of the darkened theater like a lion tamer banished to a petting zoo, berating us all for our lack of energy and nerve. "Hey, you up there," he would shout. "Yes, you, Aryan muscle boy. Can't you count? Don't you have any bones? You look like a piece of meat up there. Be electric. Act like a human creature. You poor fool. Do you want to starve in the streets?" Dave.
Good evening, I'm Paul Auster, and I'm going to read from Thoreau, a piece he wrote exactly 150 years ago called Slavery in Massachusetts, which was written in response to the fugitive slave law, which was in effect in the country then. And there was a man, a Virginia slave named Anthony Burns, who escaped, got himself up to Massachusetts, and then was sent back to his master in Virginia by the Massachusetts government. And Thoreau was out of his mind with anger. And I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of this at random. "I wish my countrymen to consider that whatever the human law may be, neither an individual nor a nation can ever commit the least act of injustice against the obscurest individual without having to pay the penalty for it. A government which deliberately enacts injustice and persists in it will at length ever become the laughingstock of the world." The press is almost, without exception, corrupt. I believe that in this country, the press exerts a greater and a more pernicious influence than the church did in its worst period. The newspaper is a Bible which we read every morning and every afternoon, standing and sitting, riding and walking. It is a Bible which every man carries in his pocket, which lies on every table and counter, and which the mail and thousands of missionaries are continually dispensing. It is, in short, the only book which America has printed and which America reads. So wide is its influence. The editor is a preacher whom you voluntarily support. Your tax is commonly 1 cent daily, and it costs nothing for pew hire. But how many of these preachers preach the truth? I repeat the testimony of many an intelligent foreigner, as well as my own convictions, when I say that probably no country was ever ruled by so mean a class of tyrants as, with a few noble exceptions, are the editors of the periodical press in this country. And as they live and rule only by their servility, and appealing to the worst and not the better nature of man, the people who read them are in the condition of the dog that returns to his vomit. Continuing on. I have lived for the last month, and I think that every man in Massachusetts capable of the sentiment of patriotism must have had a similar experience, with the sense of having suffered a vast and indefinite loss. I did not know at first what ailed me, and at last it occurred to me that what I had lost was a country. I had never respected the government near to which I had lived, but I had foolishly thought that I might manage to live here, minding my private affairs, and forget it. For my part, my old and worthiest pursuits have lost, I cannot say how much of their attraction, and I feel that my investment in life here is worth many % less, since Massachusetts last deliberately sent back an innocent man, Anthony Burns, to slavery. I dwelt before, perhaps, in the illusion that my life passed somewhere only between heaven and hell, but now I cannot persuade myself that I do not dwell wholly within hell. The site of that political organization called Massachusetts is to me morally covered with volcanic scoriae and cinders, such as Milton describes in the infernal regions. If there is any hell more unprincipled than our rulers, and we, the ruled, I feel curious to see it. Life itself being worth less, all things with it, which minister to it, are worth less. Suppose you have a small library with pictures to adorn the walls, a garden laid out around, and contemplate scientific and literary pursuits, etc., and discover all at once that your villa, with all its contents, is located in hell, and that the justice of the peace has a cloven foot and a forked tail. Do not these things suddenly lose their value in your eyes? I'm surprised to see men going about their business as if nothing had happened. I say to myself, unfortunates, they have not heard the news. I am surprised that the man whom I just met on horseback should be so earnest to overtake his newly bought cows running away, since all property is insecure, and if they do not run away again, they may be taken away from him when he gets them. Fool, does he not know that his seed corn is worth less this year, that all beneficent harvests fail as you approach the empire of hell? No prudent man will build a stone house under these circumstances, or engage in any peaceful enterprise which it requires a long time to accomplish. Art is as long as ever, but life is more interrupted and less available for a man's proper pursuits. It is not an era of repose. We have used up all our inherited freedom. If we would save our lives, we must fight for them. I walk toward one of our ponds, but what signifies the beauty of nature when men are base? We walk to lakes to see our serenity reflected in them. When we are not serene, we do not go to them. Who can be serene in a country where both the rulers and the ruled are without principle? The remembrance of my country spoils my walk. My thoughts are murder to the state, and involuntarily go plotting against her. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Russell Banks. The ladies and gentlemen in charge of American foreign policy at the State Department and the Pentagon and the White House, and a disturbingly large number of our members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, seem to believe that in their wisdom and thanks to the fertility of their collective imagination, they have invented and implemented a foreign policy new to the world, generally, and more particularly new to the United States. I speak of the combined policies of unilateral military invention and regime change. Our statesmen and women and politicians seem to believe that in the face of imminent perceived danger to the homeland, they have invented these policies out of whole cloth, as it were, and thus are taking what I consider unjustifiable pride in them. I have been doing a little historical research, and I have learned that, in fact, the United States of America has a long and distinguished and too much overlooked history of unilateral military intervention and regime change. If we but scan the past from the shores of Tripoli to the halls of Montezuma to San Juan Hill, if we remember Grenada, the Alamo, and Panama, not so much the Canal as Manuel Noriega, and Vietnam, then we will see at once that the war in Iraq is not something new, but something old, with a long and lusty tradition behind it. As evidence, I will read to you a brief excerpt from an essay written by Mark Twain in 1901 called "To the Person Sitting in Darkness," in the light of, or perhaps the shadow of, the American conquest of the Philippines. To the Person Sitting in Darkness by Mark Twain. Extending the blessings of civilization to our brother who sits in darkness has been a good trade and has paid well on the whole, and there is money in it yet if carefully worked, but not enough in my judgment to make any considerable risk advisable. The people that sit in darkness are getting to be too scarce and too shy. And such darkness as is now left is really of but an indifferent quality and not dark enough for the game. The most of those people that sit in darkness have been furnished with more light than was good for them or profitable for us. We have been injudicious. The blessings of civilization trust, wisely and cautiously administered, is a daisy. There is more money in it, more territory, more sovereignty, and other kinds of emolument than there is in any other game that is played. But Christendom has been playing it badly of late years and must certainly suffer by it, in my opinion. She has been so eager to get every stake that appeared in the green cloth that the people who sit in darkness have noticed it. They have noticed it and have begun to show alarm. They have become suspicious of the blessings of civilization. More, they have begun to examine them. This is not well. The person sitting in darkness is almost sure to say, there is something curious about this, curious and unaccountable. There must be two Americas, one that sets the captive free and one that takes a once captive's new freedom away from him and picks a quarrel with him with nothing to found it on and kills him to get his land. The truth is, the person sitting in darkness is saying things like that, and for the sake of business, we must persuade him to look at the matter in another and healthier way. We must arrange his opinions for him. I believe it can be done, for Mr. Chamberlain has arranged England's opinion of the South African matter and has done vision has had time to get back into focus. Having laid all the historical facts before the person sitting in darkness, we should bring them to him again and explain them to him. We should say to him, they look doubtful, but in reality they are not. They have been lies, yes, but they were told in a good cause. We have been treacherous, but that was only in order that real good might come out of apparent evil. True, we have crushed the deceived and confiding people. We have turned against the weak and the friendless who trusted us. We have stamped out a just and intelligent and well-ordered republic. We have stabbed an ally in the back and slapped the face of a guest. We have bought a shadow from an enemy that hadn't it to sell. We have robbed a trusting friend of his land and his liberty. We have invited our clean young men to shoulder a discredited musket and do bandits' work under a flag which bandits have been accustomed to fear, not to follow. We have debauched Americans' honor and blackened her face before the world. But each detail was for the best. We know this. The head of every state and sovereignty in Christendom, and 90% of every legislative body in Christendom, including our Congress and our 50 state legislators, are members not only of the church, but also of the Blessings of Civilization Trust. This world-girdling accumulation of trained morals, high principles, and justice cannot do an unright thing, an unfair thing, an ungenerous thing, an unclear thing. It knows what it is about. Give yourself no uneasiness. It is all right. Now then, that will convince the person who sits in darkness. You will see. It will restore the business. Also, it will elect the master of the game to the vacant place in the trinity of our national gods. And there on their high thrones, the three will sit, age after age, in the people's sight, each bearing the emblem of his service. Washington, the sword of the liberator. Lincoln, the slave's broken chains. The master, the chains repaired. It will give the business a splendid new start. You will see.
I'm Don DeLillo, and I will read a poem by Zbigniew Herbert called "Report from the Besieged City." Too old to carry arms and fight like the others, they graciously gave me the inferior role of chronicler. I record, I don't know for whom, the history of the siege. I am supposed to be exact, but I don't know when the invasion began. 200 years ago, in December and September, perhaps. Yesterday at dawn. Everyone here suffers from a loss of the sense of time. All we have left is the place, the attachment to the place. We still rule over the ruins of temples, specters of gardens, and houses. If we lose the ruins, nothing will be left. I write as I can in the rhythm of interminable weeks. Monday, empty storehouses. A rat became the unit of currency. Tuesday, the mayor murdered by unknown assailants. Wednesday, negotiations for a ceasefire. The enemy has imprisoned our messengers. Thursday, after a stormy meeting, a majority of voices rejected the motion of the spice merchants for unconditional surrender. Friday, the beginning of the plague. Saturday, our invincible defender, NN, committed suicide. Sunday, no more water. We drove back an attack at the eastern gate called the Gate of the Alliance. All of this is monotonous. I know it can't move anyone. I avoid any commentary. I keep a tight hold on my emotions. I write about the facts. Only they, it seems, are appreciated in foreign markets. Yet, with a certain pride, I would like to inform the world that thanks to the war, we have raised a new species of children. Our children don't like fairy tales. They play at killing, awake and asleep. They dream of soup, of bread and bones, like dogs and cats. In the evening, I like to wander near the outposts of the city, along the frontier of our uncertain freedom. I look at the swarm of soldiers below their lights. I listen to the sound of drums, barbarian shrieks. Truly, it is inconceivable. The city is still defending itself. The siege has lasted a long time. The enemies must take turns. Nothing unites them except the desire for our extermination. Goths, the Tatars, Swedes, troops of the Emperor, regiments of the Transfiguration, who can count them? The colors of their banners change like the forest on the horizon, from delicate bird's yellow in spring, through green, through red, to winter's black. And so, in the evening, released from facts, I can think about distant, ancient matters. For example, our friends beyond the sea. I know they sincerely sympathize. They send us flour, lard, sacks of comfort, and good advice. They don't even know their fathers betrayed us, our former allies, at the time of the second apocalypse. Their sons are blameless. They deserve our gratitude. Therefore, we are grateful. They have not experienced a siege as long as eternity. Those struck by misfortune are always alone. The defenders of the Dalai Lama, the Kurds, the Afghan mountaineers. Now, as I write these words, the advocates of conciliation have won the upper hand over the party of inflexibles. A normal hesitation of moods, fate still hangs in the balance. Cemeteries grow larger. The number of defenders is smaller, yet the defense continues. It will continue to the end. And if the city falls, but a single man escapes, he will carry the city within himself on the roads of exile. He will be the city. We look in the face of hunger, face of fire, face of death, worst of all, the face of betrayal. And only our dreams have not been humiliated. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ariel Dorfman. I'm going to read from the greatest novel of all time, written by a man who knew something about how dangerous ideas can be. In fact, he was one of the writers who has been jailed, and he was held captive many years by his Muslim enemies. And then, of course, he also knew something about the Inquisition. I'm talking about Miguel de Cervantes, de Saavedra, and Don Quixote de la Mancha. And when I was invited here by my friends at Penn, I thought I should read this book in Spanish and in English, the whole of it, all the time, right? But instead of which, I'll only read an excerpt. But I will read it in both languages. Among other reasons, because one of the strange things that is happening in this country that has admitted and admired so many languages and so many people who come from abroad and speak those languages and enrich the country with the languages, all of a sudden some of those languages are suspect. Not necessarily Spanish, though Spanish has always been un poquito suspect, let's say, right? But suspect, suspect. You speak Arabic or you speak Farsi, suspect. And so I want you, unfortunately, I'm going to read half in Spanish and half in English. It's short. But I want us just to think about the fact that, of course, you have to read Cervantes a bit in Spanish, but that it's important that we should also understand that we're defending the rights of people to speak their own language without being scared and without being looked at as if they're really very strange by reading those languages. Now, I'm going to read from chapter 49 of the second part of Don Quixote de la Mancha, El Ingenioso Hidalgo. And this is a part where Sancho Panza, who is the faithful sidekick of Don Quixote, has been given the role of a governor of an insula, like an island or a special city, right? And he's shown himself to be very sagacious in this, and he's doing the rounds at this moment. At that moment, a constable came up to Sancho and his retinue, holding a young man, and he said, "Señor Governor, this lad was coming towards us, and as soon as he saw that we were the law, he turned his back and began to run like a deer, a sign that he must be a criminal. I went after him, and if he hadn't tripped and fallen, I never would have caught him." "Why were you running away?" asked Sancho. Y en esto llegó un corchete que traía asido un mozo y dijo, "Señor gobernador, este mancebo venía hacia nosotros, y así como columbró la justicia, volvió las espaldas y comenzó a correr como un gamo, señal que debe ser algún delincuente. Yo partí tras él, y si no fuera porque tropezó y cayó, no le alcanzaría jamás." "¿Por qué huías, hombre?" preguntó Sancho. A lo que el hombre respondió, "Señor, por excusar de responder a las muchas preguntas que las justicias hacen." "¿Y a dónde ibas ahora?" "Señor, a tomar el aire." "¿Y a dónde se toma el aire en esta ínsula? ¿A dónde sopla?" "Bueno, respondéis muy a propósito. Discretos sois, mancebo", dijo Sancho. "Pero hace cuenta que yo soy el aire y que os soplo en popa y os encamino a la cárcel. Asilde, hola, y llevadle, que yo haré que duerma allá sin aire esta noche." "Por Dios", dijo el mozo, "así me haga vuestra merced dormir en la cárcel como hacerme rey." "Why were you running?" asked Sancho. To which the young man responded, "Señor, to avoid answering all the questions that constables ask." "Where are you going now?" "Señor, to take the air." "And where do you take the air on this insula?" "Wherever it blows." "Good, your answers are right to the point. You're a clever boy, but you should know that I'm the air and I'm blowing at your back and sending you to prison. You there, seize him and take him away, and I'll make him sleep without any air tonight." "By God," said the young man, "your grace will make me sleep in prison when you make me king." "And why can't I make you sleep in prison?" responded Sancho. "Don't I have the power to arrest you and let you go whenever I want to?" "No matter how much power your grace has," said the young man, "it won't be enough to make me sleep in prison." "Pues, ¿por qué no te haré yo dormir en la cárcel?" respondió Sancho. "¿No tengo yo el poder para prenderte y soltarte como cuando quiera que quisiera?" "Por más poder que vuestra merced tenga", dijo el mozo, "no será bastante para hacerme dormir en la cárcel." "Dime, demonio", dijo Sancho, ¿tienes algún ángel que te saque y que te quite los grillos que te pienso mandar echar? "Ahora, señor gobernador", respondió el mozo con muy buen donaire, "estemos a razón y vengamos al punto. Pero suponga vuestra merced que me manda a llevar a la cárcel y que en ella me echan grillos y cadenas y me metan en un calabozo. Con todo eso, si yo no quiero dormir y estarme despierto toda la noche sin pegar pestaña, ¿será vuestra merced bastante con todo su poder para hacerme dormir si yo no quiero?" "No, por cierto", dijo el secretario, y el hombre salió con su intención. "And why can't I make you sleep in prison?" responded Sancho. "Don't I have the power to arrest you and let you go whenever I want to?" "No matter how much power your grace has," said the young man, "it won't be enough to make me sleep in prison." "Tell me, you demon," said Sancho, "do you have an angel who will take you out and remove the irons that I plan to put on you?" "Now, Señor Governor," the young man responded with great charm, gran donaire, "let's use our reason and come to the point. Suppose, your grace, that you order me taken to prison, and there I'm out in irons and chains and placed in a cell. Even so, if I don't want to sleep and stay awake the whole night without closing my eyes, is all your grace's power enough to make me sleep if I don't want to?" "No, of course not," said Sancho's secretary, "and the man has proven his point." "Which means," said Sancho, "that you wouldn't sleep simply because it's your will not to, not because you want to go against mine." "No, señor," said the young man, "I wouldn't dream of that, going against your will." "Well then," said Sancho, "go with God back to your house to sleep, and may God give you a sound sleep. For I don't want to rob you of that. But I do advise that from now on you don't mock the law, because you may come across policemen who will beat the joke out of you." Now, this is a happy ending to this episode. Why? Because in this fable, there's the meeting of a wise man, a wise ruler, and a free spirit. But there's a cautionary note at the end. Sancho knows that there are policemen, in his time certainly, out there, in our time perhaps, who would beat the joke out of those they arrest. To go no further, would Sancho have imagined that we live in a time where people are beaten in order to keep them from sleeping, what is called sleep deprivation? Not to force them to sleep. Remember what Cervantes is saying, he's been saying it for many, many, many years. Basically, even if you're in prison, even if you're in chains, it always depends on whether you're awake or you're asleep, and that depends on you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eve Ensler. I've been thinking a lot about what to read tonight, and I decided that I want to read from Nawal El Saadawi, the great Egyptian feminist and writer and doctor. I had the privilege of meeting her a year ago in Cairo, and I want to read from an afterword from the memoirs, her prison memoirs. When I met Nawal, we talked a lot about fear. And I was thinking this week, on the eve of the Republican National Convention, how suddenly we're in orange alert and lockdown, and how these tactics are really brilliant tactics in terms of keeping us afraid. And this work really inspires me not to be afraid. I began inscribing these memoirs while I was in prison without benefit of paper or pen. Eventually, my memory became incapable of retaining all these pages, and I began to feel the need for a real pen and paper. With great effort, I was able to acquire a stubby black eyebrow pencil. One of the prostitutes incarcerated in a cell next to mine smuggled it into me, along with a roll of old and tattered toilet paper. When I recall these memories now, it is with a kind of odd happiness, for they were moments of triumph, of victory over the overwhelming and arbitrary might of the unjust, oppressive ruling authority that had put me behind those steel bars solely because I write. Writing such has been my crime ever since I was a small child. To this day, writing remains my crime. Now, although I am out of prison, I continue to live inside a prison of another sort, one without steel bars. For the technology of oppression and might without justice has become more advanced, and the fetters imposed on mind and body have become invisible. The most dangerous shackles are the invisible ones because they deceive people into believing they are free. This delusion is the new prison that people inhabit today, north and south, east and west. Now I have traveled to most of the countries on the globe. I have discovered that this thing called democracy is nothing but a veil, as are the words God, religion, peace, justice, used to conceal the vilest sorts of force, murder, oppression, and exploitation. This veil, which is forcibly placed over minds by the media, is more dangerous than the veil fashioned from the length of fabric that women in some countries use to cover their hair or their faces. Upon meeting a number of senior-level European and North American political science professors, I was astonished to discover that they did not know the true reasons behind the wars in the Gulf, Somalia, Bosnia, Palestine, and elsewhere. I was baffled to learn what a momentous role print journalism and the other media have played in brainwashing these professors, for then what of the masses of ordinary folk? We inhabit the age of the technology of false consciousness, the technology of hiding truths behind amiable humanistic slogans that may change from one era to another. The latest slogan, perhaps, is that of human rights, which has become a sword for the mighty to use against the weak. The knowledge of the way things really are, this is the true danger that threatens the ruling powers in any country in the world, past or present. No authority can rule millions of people without hiding the truth from them. Today, power is in the hands of the exclusive possessors of nuclear weapons and their secrets, of the media, of means of rapid broadcast and rapid killing. This power allows them to slay thousands of men, women, and children in a hugely destructive war that they have labeled a clean war, to assert their innocence. Indeed, they are the friends of God on earth, delegated by God to inflict punishment on Satan or to realize justice or peace or democracy or human rights. A president, head of a state, might be an atheist, but on the podium in front of the masses, this leader grasps hold of the scripture, whether it be the Gospels, the Torah, or the Quran, and reads the verses that support the practices of war and murder. I have often asked why Sadat put me in prison, and I have only one answer. I took him at his word when he spoke of democracy. I began to write, to criticize his policies, and suddenly I was in prison. True democracy is not just freedom to criticize the government or head or state or to hold parliamentary elections. True democracy obtains only when the people, women, men, young people, and children, have the ability to change the system of industrial capitalism that has oppressed them since the earliest days of slavery. A system based on class division, patriarchy, and military might. A hierarchical system that subjugates people merely because they are born poor, female, or dark-skinned. When I came out of prison, there were two routes I could have taken. I could have become one of those slaves to the ruling institution, thereby acquiring security, property, prosperity, the state prize, and the title of great writer. I could have seen my picture in the newspaper and on the television. Or I could continue on the difficult path, the one that had led me to prison. I chose the second way, and so I came to be under permanent threat, not only of imprisonment, but indeed of death. Danger has been part of my life ever since I picked up a pen and wrote. Nothing is more perilous than the truth in a world of lies. Nothing is more perilous than knowledge in a world that has considered knowledge a sin since Adam and Eve. But I don't feel the danger, perhaps because it is part of my life, just as a train or an airplane passenger doesn't sense the motion once having become a part of it. And so nothing can alarm me. Writing is my life. There is no power in the world that can strip my writings from me. They have been printed and published. They have thousands, perhaps millions of readers in the Arab world and across the globe. Since childhood, a dream has inhabited my imagination. I write my words and people read them. Today, tomorrow, the day after. When does not matter, for people will read them. Those are the people who make a homeland, and my homeland has become those people. Don't be afraid.
And possibly the greatest accidental poet in history, our President, George Bush. Every word that I'm going to read is actually a word of his. In fact, I think every clause is a clause of his. I just helped out with some of the arranging. And the only thing you need to know is that a killdee is an endangered bird. This is called Birds and Hunter. It's good to see so many of my friends here in the Rose Garden. I've seen fox in here. I've seen all kinds of birds. I want to thank the astronauts who are with us, the courageous spatial entrepreneurs. I didn't even take that one out of context. That was... Look, this has been tough weeks in this country. This foreign policy stuff is a little frustrating. We've been kind of ooching along. But this is a fabulous country in which we live. It is. Border relations between Canada and Mexico have never been better. More and more of our imports are coming from overseas. Today, through sonograms and other technology, we see clearly. God loves you and I love you. It's good to see so many of my friends here in the Rose Garden. I promise you I will listen to what has been said here, even though I wasn't here. Please just remember, it's the birds that's supposed to suffer, not the hunter. What do I want to say? Well, you're free, and freedom is fabulous. Sadly, too many youths are not getting that message. I want to tell them, you're free, you fucking son of a bitch. And freedom is fabulous. I want the folks to see me sitting in the same kind of seat they sit in, eating the same popcorn, peeing in the same urinal, I want to know who the leakers are. I married well. What a fabulous woman she is. Fortunately, she said yes when I asked her to marry me, and now she's the fabulous First Lady of our country. Mission accomplished. This country's a fabulous country. Dr. Condoleezza Rice is an honest, fabulous person. Listen, this guy Colin Powell has done a fabulous job. We've got a fabulous United States military, and they're on the hunt. I'll tell you, I love going to North Carolina. It's a fabulous state full of fabulous people. And I'm proud to be your president. How many hands have I shaked? I'm honored to shake the hand of a brave Iraqi citizen who had his hand cut off by Saddam Hussein. That fucking son of a bitch. I think war is a dangerous place. I am not a revengeful person. I killed a kildee. I thought it was a dove. I took immense crap for that. I know what I believe. I will continue to articulate what I believe, and I believe what I believe is right. I believe the human being and the fish can coexist peacefully. I believe every life matters, whether it be an American life or the life of an Afghan girl. I believe free nations don't develop weapons of mass destruction. Of course, I also understand that many problems can only be solved by love. One of the great things about this country is a lot of people pray. I killed a kildee. I swear I thought it was a dove. And just remember, it's the bird that's supposed to suffer, not the hunter. I'm the master of low expectations. I'm also not very analytical. You know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about myself, about why I do things. Here's where I get a little more creative. I killed a surplus. I thought it was a paycheck. I killed wilderness. I thought it was a good place to drill. I'm a person who recognizes the fallacy of humans. Just remember, it's the electorate that's supposed to suffer, not the electoral college. The birds, not the hunter. Those who will inherit the earth, not those who already have. I killed 1,000 families. I thought they were an army. Much has been given and much is owed. You're free and freedom is fabulous. That's the most deep thought of all. Some say it's time to restore chaos and order. I'm not going to talk about what I did as a child, how I killed the mentally disabled because I thought they were dangerous to society, how I killed our schools because I thought that they could be doing much, much better, and how I killed the Constitution because I thought it was a pair of handcuffs. The point is, this is what has come and is coming, and it's the birds that's supposed to suffer. I'm a follower of American politics, but I don't know whether I'm going to win or not. I think I am, and if not, that's just the way it goes. This is historic times. Nobody has a clue what's going to happen, and I'm one of them. Some nights I can't sleep. Well, we all have nightmares, because these are scary times, and there is so much to be scared of. So many imminent threats. And I have nightmares too. I hear America, neither in French, nor in English, nor in Mexican, but from its one firmly resolved heart saying, we're bringing this solution to an end. Saying, we love you, W, but you killed too many things. Saying, for every hunter, there are 280 million birds, and the gun goes both ways. We love you, we do, but we're going to hold you accountable for your actions, you fucking son of a bitch. Thank you.
I'm Barbara Goldsmith. I'm taking you back on a trip in time. The date is November 5th, 1872. A woman that in those days was referred to as a spinster went to a voting booth and cast her ballot for Ulysses S. Grant with Susan B. Anthony. That night, she wrote to her partner, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, "Well, I've been and gone and I've done it. I voted the Republican ticket at 7 o'clock and swore my vote in and registered last Friday." It hadn't been easy. She'd argued with the registrars for over an hour and finally used an argument that's always helped in America. She said that if they didn't let her register, she would, quote, "sue each of you for large exemplary damages." "I know I can win," she said. "There is lots of money to back me, and if I have to, I will push to the last ditch in all the courts." Well, she didn't have any money, but she did push to the last ditch. She was arrested. They came to her house, and she said, "You're just going to take me to the station? You have to put me in handcuffs so people can see what you're doing to women." She felt she had the right to vote. Recently, they had passed the 14th Amendment to the American Constitution, and it said, I quote, "All persons born and naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States, and as citizens, they are entitled to the privileges rendered to such people." She paid taxes, she was a citizen, she was born, and she thought the vote was one of those privileges. Others did not. All that winter, after she was released from jail and before her trial, she lectured on why women should have the vote, why everyone should have the vote. She said, "The right of the vote is the primary right by which all other rights are protected. To take away this right is to reduce man to a state of slavery, for slavery consists in being subjected to the will of others, and he that has not the vote in the election of representatives is, in this case, powerless." Finally, they brought her to trial on June 17, 1873. It was a rigged trial. There was a jury, but they were not to say anything or to render the verdict. The judge said he would render the verdict. She was not allowed to speak on the grounds that women were not empowered to serve on juries, to speak in what they call promiscuous assemblies. That means where men and women were both present. And so she had to be quiet during the entire trial. However, the judge made one big mistake. At the end of the trial, he said, "Has the prisoner anything to say why sentence should not be pronounced?" Susan B. Anthony stood up and said, "Yes, Your Honor, I have many, many things to say. For in your verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of the American government. You have trampled my natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights, all of which have been ignored. I have been robbed. I have been robbed of a fundamental privilege of citizenship, and I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject. And not only I am degraded, all of my sex is degraded by your honor, and we are doomed to this terrible form of government." The judge answered, "The court cannot hear these arguments. Counsel has already said several of these things." "May it please your honor," answered Miss Anthony. "I'm not arguing the question. I'm simply stating the reasons why the sentence cannot in justice be pronounced against me. You've denied my rights. and you've denied the right of anyone to life, liberty, property, and the judge cut in. We can't allow you to go on, he said. Your Honor can't deny me to go on. It's the only poor privilege of protest that I have, and it is the only tool I have to say this is an outrage to a citizen's right. May it please the court that since the day of my arrest, no person has said a word in my defense before a jury because they have not been permitted to do so. The prisoner must sit down, he said. Not yet, she said. I will not sit down. You have not submitted my case to a jury. You have not asked me to be judged by my peers. Even a commoner in England tried before a jury of lords would have more power than I have. I am a disenfranchised person, not entitled to sit upon a jury, nor to gain admission to the bar, nor to anything, for you feel yourself a superior class. Judge Hunt said, the court must insist that you have been tried according to established forms of our law. Yes, Your Honor, she said, I certainly have. A law made by men, interpreted by men, against women. It was not very long ago when you declared a crime punishable by a $1,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment if you gave a cup of cold water or a crust of bread or a night's shelter to a panting fugitive as he made his way to Canada. And every man, woman, and child in whose veins coursed a drop of human sympathy violated that wicked law, regardless of the consequences. And they were totally justified in doing so. And then, as slaves got their freedom, they took over and changed those laws. And women must now do the same. The court orders the prisoner to sit down. I will not allow you to say another word. Even to get a trial by jury of my peers, she said, I don't want leniency. I want to speak, and I ask only for the full rights of the law. With that, she sat down. Judge Hunt extracted from his pocket the sentence that he had written before any of the trial had begun. He put it in front of him and read it. And he fined her to $100 and said that she might say nothing more, but she did. Susan B. Anthony said, I shall never pay a penny of that unjust penalty. She said, your government must never make such unjust claims, and I shall earnestly and persistently continue to urge all women to recognize the old revolutionary maxim, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. And she never paid the fine, and she never saw the vote in her lifetime.
Up and fly right, and I am waiting for the age of anxiety to drop dead, and I am waiting for the war to be fought which will make the world safe for anarchy, and I am waiting for the final withering away of all governments, and I am perpetually awaiting a rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for the second coming, and I am waiting for a religious revival to sweep through the state of Arizona, and I am waiting for the grapes of wrath to be stored, and I am waiting for them to prove that God really is American. And I am seriously waiting for Billy Graham and Elvis Presley to exchange roles seriously. And I am waiting to see God on television piped onto church altars if only they can find the right channel to tune in on. And I am waiting for the Last Supper to be served again with a strange new appetizer, and I am perpetually awaiting a rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for my number to be called, and I am waiting for the living end, and I am waiting for Dad to come home, his pockets full of irradiated silver dollars, and I am waiting for the atomic test to end, and I am waiting happily for things to get much worse before they improve, and I am awaiting the Salvation Army to take over, and I am waiting for the human crowd to wander off a cliff somewhere, clutching its atomic umbrella, and I am waiting for Ike to act, and I am waiting for the meek to be blessed and inherit the earth without taxes, and I am waiting for forests and animals to reclaim the earth as theirs, and I am waiting for a way to be devised to destroy all nationalisms without killing anybody. And I am waiting for linnets and planets to fall like rain, and I am waiting for lovers and weepers to lie down together again in a new rebirth of wonder. And I am waiting for the great divide to be crossed, and I am anxiously waiting for the secret of eternal life to be discovered by an obscure general practitioner and save me forever from certain death. And I am waiting for life to begin, and I am waiting for the storms of life to be over, and I am waiting to set sail for happiness. I am waiting for a reconstructed Mayflower to reach America with its picture story and TV rights sold in advance to the natives. And I am waiting for the lost music to sound again in a lost continent in a new rebirth of wonder. I am waiting to get some imitations of immortality by recollecting my early childhood, and I am waiting for the green mornings to come again, youth's dumb green fields to come again, and I am waiting for some strains of unpremeditated art to shake my typewriter. And I am waiting to write that great indelible poem, and I am waiting for the long last careless rapture, and I am perpetually waiting for the fleeing lovers on the Grecian urn to catch up to each other at last and embrace, and I am waiting perpetually and forever a renaissance of wonder.
I'm Margot Jefferson, and I am going to read first from James Baldwin's The Devil Finds Work, which is a memoir through the movies. The passage right before what I'll read concerns a vehemently, virulently, ecstatically anti-communist movie called My Son John, in which a very noble FBI agent played by Van Heflin persuades a very high-strung and worshipful of her son mother, played by Helen Hayes, to do the right thing and turn the son, whom they're sure is a communist, in. And she does. And he dies, ultimately. My first encounter with the FBI took place in 1945 in Woodstock, New York, where I was living in a cabin in the woods. I had not the slightest notion as to why they'd come looking for me. I knew of nothing which I could possibly have done to have attracted their attention. Much later in my life, I knew very well what I had done to attract their attention and intended simply to keep on keeping on. But on this morning, I was terribly frightened, and I was desperately trying to keep one jump ahead of them, to guess what it was before they revealed it. If I could guess what it was, then I might know how to answer and know what to do. It developed that they were looking for a boy who had deserted from the Marines. I knew no one answering that description, and I said so. They conveyed very vividly what they would do to me if I did not tell them the truth, what they could do to smart niggers like me. My ass would be in a sling. That was among the gentler warnings. They showed me a series of photographs. One photograph rang a distant bell, and they saw this. I had seen the face somewhere, but I could not remember where. And now, my problem was to remember where I had seen the face and then double-lock the memory out of their reach. And eventually, I did remember. The boy's name was Teddy. I had met him at a party with some friends of mine. I knew the name now, and I was determined not to reveal it. It was no part of my duty to help them trap the cat, and no doubt he had his reasons for deserting the Marines. But the interrogation was rugged, ruthless and prolonged, and eventually the name slipped out. Well, there was Carmen and me and Joe and Teddy. Teddy, is this Teddy? I cursed myself, for of course they had known the name all along. My utterance of the name had confirmed something, and I had been helpful to them after all. When the interrogation was finally over, one of them took out a nickel and dropped it in my palm. With this nickel, the moment I had any news of Teddy, I was to call him. They left me finally, haunted the cabin, and roamed the town for 2 days. Teddy never appeared. I never spent the nickel. I threw it away. Teddy was turned in. I learned much later in New York during my visit in 1952. One of the friends at that long-gone party really did know Teddy, and the FBI had come to see him too, and had also given him a nickel. I was having dinner with this friend one night, and he told me in the casual course of conversation that he believed that Teddy had stolen his typewriter. And this had made him so angry that he had gone downstairs to the drugstore and dropped the nickel in the slot and turned the deserter in. Well, perhaps he would have turned him in anyway. Human beings, including you and me, are capable of anything, and I might have turned him in. Being human, I certainly have no guarantee that betrayal is not among my possibilities. And indeed, betrayal takes so many forms that I know myself to have been guilty of betrayal more than once. But I do not think that my friend, with whom I never broke bread again, would have spoken of it so lightly had it not been for the moral climate of the time. I loved my country, but I could not respect it, could not upon my soul be reconciled to my country as it was. And I loved my work, had great respect for the craft which I was compelled to study, and wanted it to have some human use. It was beginning to be clear to me that these two loves might never in my life be reconciled. No man can serve two masters. And now a short passage from Zora Neale Hurston's autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road. When it was published in 1942, the chapter called Seeing the World as It Is, which this is from, was cut. The editor believed that international opinions, as he put it, were not relevant to autobiography. Being human and a part of humanity, I like to think that my own nation is more just than any other in spite of the facts on hand. But now and then the embroidered hangings blow aside, and I see that the high principles enunciated so throatedly are like the flowers in spring. They have nothing to do with the case. I know the principle of human bondage has not yet vanished from the earth. I know that great nations are standing on it. I would not go so far as to deny that there has been no progress toward the concept of liberty. Already it has been agreed that the notion of slavery, the name of slavery, is very bad. No civilized nation will use such a term anymore. Neither will they keep the business around the house. Life will be on a loftier level by operating at a distance and calling it acquiring sources of raw material and keeping the market open. Must a nation suffer from lack of prosperity and expansion by lofty concepts? Not at all. If a ruler can find a place way off where the people do not look like him, kill enough of them to convince the rest that they ought to support him with their lives and labor, then he's hailed as a great conqueror, and people build monuments to him. Democracy, like religion, never was designed to make our profits less. The United States being the giant of the Western world, we have our responsibilities. We have our Marines in China. We consider machine gun bullets good laxatives for heathens who get constipated with toxic ideas about a country of their own. The little Latin brother south of the border has been a trifle trying at times, so it is our big brotherly duty to teach him right from wrong. He must be taught to share with Big Brother before Big Brother comes down and kicks his teeth in. I will fight for my country, but I will not lie for her. Our country is so busy playing fence to the mobsters, that the cost in human suffering cannot even be considered yet. We can take that up in the next depression.
My name is Edward Jones. Dalton Trumbo, one of the Hollywood 10, published the novel Johnny Got His Gun in 1939. In it, Joe Bonham goes off to World War I, believing he will return a kind of hero. He comes back without arms and legs, without eyes, without hearing. His mouth is just a tiny, useless hole. He is simply a faceless torso. No one communicates with him, and of course, he can't communicate with anyone else. He's been in the hospital for years. Today, the generals have given him a medal. While he lay there rolling and puffing, he felt a vibration way down in his throat, a vibration that might be a voice. It was a short, deep vibration, and he knew that it was making a sound to their ears. Not a very big sound, not a very intelligent sound, but it must seem to them at least as interesting as the grunting of a pig. And if he could grunt like a pig, why then he was accomplishing a great thing, because before he had been completely silent. So he lay thrashing and puffing and grunting like a pig, hoping that they would see damn well how much he appreciated their medal. While he was in the middle of this, there was an indefinite churning of footsteps and then the departing vibrations of his guests. A moment later, he was all alone in the blackness and the silence. He was all alone with his medal. Suddenly he quieted. He was thinking about the vibrations of those footsteps. He had always carefully felt for vibrations. He had measured the size of his nurses and the dimensions of his room by them. But suddenly to feel the vibrations of 4 or 5 people tramping across the room made him think. It made him realize that vibrations was very important. He had thought of them up to this time only as vibrations coming to him. Now he began to consider that also there could be vibrations going from him. The vibrations which he received told him everything: height, weight, distance, time. Why shouldn't he be able to tell something to the outside world by vibrations also? In the back of his mind, something began to glimmer. If he could in some way make use of vibrations, he could communicate with these people. Then the glimmer became a great dazzling white light. It opened up such breathless prospects that he thought he might suffocate from sheer excitement. Vibrations were a very important part of communication. The fall of a foot on the floor is one kind of vibration. The tap of a telegraph key is simply another kind. Tentatively, he raised his head from the pillow and let it fall back again. Then he did it twice quickly. This would be a dash and 2 dots. He tapped out SOS against his pillow. Dot, 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 dot. Dot, 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 SOS, help. If there was anybody in the whole world needed help, he was the guy, and now he was asking for it. He wished the nurse would hurry back. He began to tap out questions. What time is it? What's the date? Where am I? Is the sun shining or is it cloudy? Does anybody know who I am? Do my folks know I'm lying here? Don't tell them. Don't let them know anything about it. SOS, help. The door of the room jarred open and the nurse's footsteps came up to the bed. He began to tap out more frantically now. Here he was right on the brink of finding people, of finding the world, of finding a big part of life itself. Tap, tap, tap. He was waiting for her. Tap, tap, tap in response. A tap against his forehead or his chest. Even if she didn't know the code, she could tap just to let him know she understood what he was doing. Then she could rush away for someone who could help her. Get what he was saying. SOS, 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 help. He felt the nurse standing there looking down at him, trying to figure out what he was doing. The mere possibility that she didn't understand after all he had gone through before discovering it himself shocked him into such excitement and fear that he began to grunt again. He lay grunting and tapping, until the muscles in the back of his neck ached, until his head ached, until he felt that his chest would burst from his eagerness to shout out to explain to her what he was trying to do. And still he felt her standing motionless beside his bed, looking down and wondering. Then he felt her hand against his forehead. For just a moment she held it there. He kept on tapping, growing angry now and hopeless and feeling like he wanted to throw up. She began to stroke his forehead in slow, gentle motions. She was stroking it in a way she had never done it before. He felt pity in the softness of her touch. Then her hand went from his forehead clear back through his hair, and he remembered that Corinne used to do that sometimes. But he put Corinne out of his mind and kept right on tapping, because this was such an important thing that he couldn't stop it for pleasant sensations. The pressure of the hand against his forehead was getting heavier. He realized that she was trying, by the weight of her hand, to make him tired, so he quit tapping. He began to tap all the harder, all the faster, to show her that her plan wouldn't work. He could feel the vertebrae in the back of his neck crack and pop from the strain of this unexpected work. The nurse's hand grew heavier and heavier on his head. His neck grew tireder and tireder. It had been a terrible day, a long day, an exciting day. His tapping grew slower, and her hand got heavier, and finally he lay back very quietly against the pillow while she brushed his forehead.
Good evening. I'm Walter Dean Myers. Thank you for coming out tonight and supporting our country. I'm going to read an editorial written by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1919 in the Crisis magazine. We are returning from war. The crisis and tens of thousands of black men were drafted into a great struggle for America and her highest ideals. We fought in far-off hope for the dominant Southern oligarchy entrenched in Washington. We fought in bitter resignation. But today, we return. We return from the slavery of uniform, which the world's madness demanded us to don, to the freedom of civil garb. We stand again to look America squarely in the face and call a spade a spade. We sing, this country of ours, despite all its better souls have done and dreamed, is yet a shameful land. It disenfranchises its own citizens. Disenfranchisement is the deliberate theft and robbery of the only protection of poor against rich and black against white. The land that disenfranchises its citizens and calls itself a democracy lies and knows it lies. It encourages ignorance. It has never really tried to educate the Negro. A dominant minority does not want Negroes educated. It wants servants, dogs, whores, and monkeys. And when this land allows a reactionary group, by its stolen political power, to force as many black folk into these categories as it possibly can, it cries in contemptible hypocrisy. They threaten us with degeneracy. They cannot be educated. It steals from us. It organizes industry to cheat us. It cheats us out of our land. It cheats us out of our labor. It confiscates our savings. It reduces our wages. It raises our rent. It steals our profit. It taxes us without representation. It keeps us consistently and universally poor, and then feeds us on charity and derides our poverty. It insults us. It has organized a nationwide and latterly a worldwide propaganda of deliberate and continuous insult and defamation of black blood wherever found. It decrees that it shall not be possible in travel nor residence, work nor play, education nor instruction for a black man to exist without tacit or open acknowledgement of his inferiority. and it looks upon any attempt to question or even discuss this dogma as arrogance, unwarranted assumption, and treason. This is the country to which we soldiers of democracy return. This is the fatherland for which we fought, but it is our fatherland. It was right for us to fight. The faults of our country are our faults. Under similar circumstances, we would fight again. But by the God of heaven, we are cowards and jackasses. If now that the war is over, we do not marshal every ounce of our brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our own land, we return. We return from fighting. We return fighting. Make way for democracy. We will save it in the United States of America. I know the reason why. W.E.B. Du Bois. Thank you.
I'm Francine Prose, and I'm going to read the evening's second poem by Zbigniew Herbert. When I heard that of the 16 writers reading tonight, 2 were going to read poems by the same Polish poet, at first it seemed to me just a strange coincidence. And then as I thought about it, it began to seem more interesting and, in fact, scary that in this dark time for our country, the voices that spoke to us and for us so clearly were those of Eastern European poets writing in their own dark time. They were very familiar with the problem, the question of why and how they would continue to make art in view of the horrors happening around them. Many of us are struggling with the same problem, and it's partly what this poem is about. The poem's called 5 Men, and it's written in 3 brief sections. 5 men. 1. They take them out in the morning to the stone courtyard and put them against the wall. 5 men, 2 of them very young, the others middle-aged. Nothing more can be said about them. 2. When the platoon level their guns, everything suddenly appears in the garish light of obviousness. The yellow wall, the cold blue, the black wire on the wall instead of a horizon. That is the moment when the 5 senses rebel. They would gladly escape like rats from a sinking ship. Before the bullet reaches its destination, the eye will perceive the flight of the projectile, the ear record the steely rustle, the nostrils will be filled with biting smoke, a petal of blood will brush the palate, the touch will shrink and then slacken. Now they lie on the ground, covered up to their eyes with shadow. The platoon walks away. Their button straps and steel helmets are more alive than those lying beside the wall. 3. I did not learn this today. I knew it before yesterday. So why have I been writing unimportant poems on flowers? What did the 5 talk of the night before the execution? Of prophetic dreams, of an escapade in a brothel, of automobile parts, of a sea voyage, of how when he had spades he ought not to have opened, of how vodka is best, wine gives you a headache, of girls, of fruits, of life. Thus one can use in poetry names of Greek shepherds. One can attempt to catch the color of the morning sky, write of love, and also, once again, in dead earnest, offer to the betrayed world a rose. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Monique Trung. On March 11th, 2003, 9 days before the U.S. began bombing Baghdad, 2 Republican members of the House of Representatives held a news conference. During such tense and crucial times, what did these 2 elected officials have to say to the nation and the world at large? They announced that the word French had been replaced with the word freedom on the cafeteria menus in 3 of the House office buildings, thus allowing members of the House and staffers to dine, presumably with a clearer conscience, on freedom fries and freedom toast. In an effort to dishonor this governmentally approved elision from our vocabulary, I would like to inform you that tonight I'm going to read from a freedom novel. It's called Slander, and it's by a Vietnamese-French novelist named Linda Lê. The English translation is by Esther Allen. At its simplest, this passage is a kind of short love note to books. The character who delivers the ode is a man, an immigrant, who had spent over a decade in an insane asylum in France. With the help of a steady diet of books, he has since obtained his release and is working in a library. As with many freedom novels, it's a bit vague. Vague as to whether the books have helped the character to stave off madness, to cure him of it, or whether the books have simply taught him the appearance of sanity. What this passage makes clear, though, is that the relationship between the man and his books is altogether necessary. The passage is, for me, a reminder of why this relationship, this swapping of ideas and intimacies, deserves and requires the right to privacy and freedom of thought in order to function and to flourish. I brought back from the library a book taken out of the philosophy section. As I leafed through it, a sentence caught my eye. It is no fun to play in a world where everyone cheats, beginning with me. Perhaps I won't read this book all the way through. Maybe I won't read it at all. It is enough for me to know that I've had it in my pocket, there, close against me, in the right-hand pocket of my jacket. The book that contains these few words. It is no fun to play in a world where everyone cheats. I don't read out of a desire for erudition. I look in books for a sign of recognition. I leaf through a lot of them. Most of the time, I see nothing other than a book, some paragraphs, some words. I get tired of turning the pages. I'm ready to stop. Then the miracle happens. I pick up a book, I open it, and something there makes a sign to me. In those moments, I feel like a shipwrecked man who sees a hand on the horizon, a hand waving on the surface of the water, a living hand, a hand that can do nothing for me, but still a hand that signals to me, tells me that at least there are 2 of us shipwrecked here in this sea of solitude. When a book makes a sign like that to me, I carry it back to my room. I set it on the table next to my bed. Suddenly, the room is inhabited by a master who confides to me, it is no fun to play in a world where everyone cheats, beginning with me. I mull over this phrase. There's enough there to feed on for days, weeks. At other times, I take the book with me. I keep it in my pocket. It keeps me warm. It's like a friend whom I meet for the first time every morning. I introduce myself to it. I'm a stranger here. It answers me. Je ne suis pas d'ici non plus. I'm not from here either. We turn our back on the world. We walk in the same direction. We set out to conquer the great nowhere. Thank you.
Okay, you're almost free to go. For the benefit of radio listeners, this is Salman Rushdie again. And just to, as a kind of couple of final thoughts, just to remind you of the PEN Core Freedoms campaign and to encourage you to look it up on the PEN website at pen.org and to go to the readerprivacy.org website and see if you want to sign up there and to fill out the little cards and hand them in. Remember the great British music hall comedian who, according to legend, was one of the figures on whom Samuel Beckett based The Tramps and Waiting for Godot, called Max Wall. And at the end of his act, he would always say, "Don't clap, throw money." I feel the same way right now. Thank you for being so attentive to us, and I think, as I said to begin with, it's I think, a sign of how important we all find the situation in which we find ourselves, and that this state of emergency really is something which can only be dealt with by our joint efforts. I'm going to finish just by reading two short pieces sent in by writers who were not able to be here today. The writer Francisco Goldman sent in this piece, which is written by the Cuban independence hero and poet José Martí, who was actually for a long time a New Yorker. He lived in New York from 1880 to 1895, observed the politics of the time very closely, and wrote a piece about the presidential election of 1884, which pitted James G. Blaine against Grover Cleveland and is often called the dirtiest campaign in American history. During the course of which the Republicans found that Cleveland had had a child out of wedlock, and he acknowledged paternity and won the election anyway by 48.5% to 48.2%, including Florida. And this is what Martí said about that election. It's brutal and nauseating, a presidential campaign in the United States. The mud comes up to the chairs. The white beards of the newspapers forget all about the decorum of old age. They dump buckets of mud on all our heads. They knowingly lie and exaggerate. They stab each other in the belly and the back. Any defamation is treated as legitimate. Every blow is good as long as it staggers the enemy. He who invents an effective slander proudly struts. A good faith observer has no idea how to analyze a battle in which everyone considers it legitimate to campaign in bad faith. But he who observes this country without rancor, as much as he is disgusted by the primacy ceded to the appetites here, and the forgetfulness, if not the disdain, in which the generous qualities are held, also has to recognize that whenever it appears that a danger is imminent, or that an institution has been profaned beyond redemption, or that some vice has half devoured the nation, there arises with the reliability of a law, and without great apparatus, and when the evil can still be cured, the men and systems that can avoid ruin. They appear, do what they have to do, and drop from sight. And it also appears that a condition of this law is that the evil has to be extreme, as if the prosperous peoples never decide to change direction or perturb their habits until the reality becomes so dire that it is impossible to ignore. This was the law affirmed by the election of Grover Cleveland. The evil was very grave. The Republicans entrenched in power cynically abused it. They subverted the integrity of the vote and of the press. They mocked the spirit of the Constitution through partisan legislation and copying the tactics of tyrants, and used overseas wars to deflect attention from their actions. It's history. Who had a chance to compete against them, defeat them, if elections are won by the force of money, if the Republicans have a free hand with the national coffers? But a wave rose up that no one saw forming on the margins, and no one knows how it came, breaking over the heads of all the ambitious and illustrious politicians of the nation. Despite the anger of the members of his own Democratic Party, despite time-proven practices and conceits, and landed in the White House, a man just a little more than barely known, a tough but humble man fit for the task of fearlessly and patiently reforming the corrupt government. The wave brought Cleveland. Up close you see that the change has not been essential or durable, but circumstantial and like a proof, an eruption proving that it can be done, that the eruption of a fistful of men, a fistful of honorable people, nothing more than that, have given victory to Cleveland. 1,000 votes less among 10 million voters, and the president would have been an impure and sinister man, a brilliant sophist. He would have been Blaine. He would have been Blaine. That's it. Yeah. And finally, from former president of Penn, Norman Mailer. He sent us the briefest contribution of anybody, yeah. From John Dos Passos in USA. All right then, we are two nations. However, I also wanted to read from from what Norman said in the interview that is in the current issue of the New York Magazine, in a conversation with his son. And this is how it ends. Norman writes, or says, "Wisdom is ready to reach us from the most unexpected quarters. Here I quote from a man who became wise a little too late in life. Naturally, the common people don't want war. But after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy. And it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country." That was Hermann Göring speaking at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. It is one thing to be forewarned. Will we ever be forearmed? Thank you.